One real quick point I didn't want to take with manual that I forgot to mention. Just a little ways down the hill is the actual mine tunnel entrance. Okay, now it may seem like a long way when you're digging underground, but actually the Confederate line was right here. So if you think about it, and you look just below the crest of that hill, and you look at where the Confederate line was, imagine how large that crater was when it blew. Think about how close the lines actually were. So they were within firing distance, plenty of firing distance, and they're like I said. The Union troops, even waiting that far away, were concerned that the tunnel might, or the line might even literally cause damage to the Federal line.
The miners will start digging, of course, with no conversation on their part. They're not in the upper echelon of command, as to how there's going to be a battle, or is there going to be a battle once the mine is finished and exploded. That will rest upon Ambrose Burnside. Most of you may be familiar, but for those who are not, Burnside's a pretty tall guy, usually pretty jovial. Don't get him in a bad mood, however. That will change. He has big sideburns. That's what most people kind of know him for. And early in the war, he enlisted. He had been the Army of Potomac commander in late 1862 and very early 1863. And people have different opinions about him. I readily admit that I will defend Burnside to some degree. And in this particular instance, Burnside will think of a battle plan for this action. His plan is going to be kind of given out to other officers who need to know early in July 1864. He goes and tells Edward Ferrero, who leads the 4th Division of the 9th Corps, those troops that are up on the hillside there behind you, stretching in either direction through what's now woods, that it will be his division that will go in the lead. The other 3 divisions of the 9th Corps have been overly used during the Overland Campaign, May, June, and early June of 1864. Shot to pieces, really, in a lot of these battles that had taken place over that several-week time frame. The troops seem to be quite annoyed by the heat and the pest of the summer, and they are also been exposed here in the line, so their morale is down. But Ferrero's division has not been used really in this combat in the Overland Campaign. George Meade, the Army of the Potomac commander in 1864, has pretty much kept them to the rear, guarding prisoners of war, wagons, cattle that's moving with the army, but they haven't been out on the front line. So what makes Ferrero's division unique is the fact that they are a division made up of United States colored troops. These regiments have been raised generally in 1863 and 1864, hadn't been deployed pretty much on the battlefield. So they're not veteran troops, but they're really excited troops. They want to go into combat, unlike many of the veteran troops, which I see there's some people around, at least earlier, had on some hats that showed that they had been veterans. And I've never been, but I'm sure that combat experience will change your mind as to whether you're really excited to go in or not. Well, they've never been in, so they're really excited to go in. And here we have this white officer saying, yes, you go first. You take the lead. You be that initial breakthrough into the line. And when they are deployed, he is going to tell Ferrero, train a couple of your regiments. They will then move around the explosion site on the day of the explosion. They will push out Confederate resistance to either side of the Confederate line. The rest of these colored troops will follow, reforming in the rear of the Confederate division and moving toward Blandford Cemetery, the high ground in Petersburg. 3 divisions of white troops in the 9th Corps will simply follow them in, basically, reforming in the rear and pushing off to Blandford Cemetery. Theoretically, Lee will then start to try to patch the hole in the line, leaving other areas deserted. Other Army Corps from the Army of the Potomac and the Army of the James can penetrate the Confederate line. Lee's lines will collapse, and they will have Petersburg. So, that's the plan. The degree to which colored troops were trained for this assault is still hotly debated, nearly 150 years after that training commenced, or didn't, depending on where you fall on that. And the white troops have pretty much been, you'll just follow in the code. That's all that they more or less know. Mining takes about a month to complete that. Things seem to be all ready to go. General Grant has a plan in action. He is going to move troops north of the James River. Lee responds as any good commander would when the Confederate capital is in danger of potentially being captured. That weakens the Petersburg front, precisely what Grant wanted. The date of the battle has already been set for the 30th of July. And on the 28th of July, Burnside is paid a visit by the Army commander, George Meade. There he is told, you cannot use Ferrero's division. If they go out upon the battlefield and are slaughtered by the enemy, then white troops rush in and capture the city. It will look as though we don't care about them. And that would be, as he told Burnside, impolitic. Burnside protested. They go back and forth about this issue. Meade also does not like Burnside's battle plans of moving around the explosion site, believing they should move as directly and swiftly as possible to the Confederate positions. But there's no other plan as to what to do when they get there. So Burnside is arguing about that. So they both agree that they'll let Grant settle the matter. And Grant hears Meade's perspective at a meeting at City Point. Meade obviously, like any person who wants to get their point across, argues what he feels. And kind of cuts Burnside's opinion more or less out of the conversation. So Grant agrees that it probably wouldn't be a good idea to send in colored troops first, get them all killed, let white troops run in and win the day. So the plan is changed, which is communicated to Burnside on the 29th of July, late afternoon, when Meade comes to Burnside's headquarters and tells him about this. So we're about 15 hours before assault, and we're changing the entire battle plan. We're not using the people that are trained or semi-trained to lead the assault. We are now going to use veteran white troops because they are white and veterans. And we're just moving to the center. When you get there, you kind of figure it out as to what to do next. Several of you are grunting because you see that this is not going to probably bode well for the Federals. So everyone's kind of piled up back there on Taylor House Hill in the background of the earthworks that were once there. When the fuse is lit that morning at 3:30, and as we've already heard, it did not initially go off. It was relit. At 4:44 a.m., there was, as a Michigan officer said, the earth seemed to tremble as though there were an earthquake. And they watched as this position blew up. The men here in Elliott, South Carolina Brigade and the Virginia Battery of Richard Pegram, 278 men lost just from the explosion of the gunpowder. But all of these people in bits and pieces now must come back down to the earth. 100,000 estimated cubic feet of earth shot into the sky must come down. The cannon, the bayoneted weapons, the splintering of the wood that are holding up the earthworks, all raining down half mile in all directions. The men in James Ledley's division who are going to lead the assault are shocked and they fall back a bit, but their officers get them back in the line. Up on that hill are over 100 cannon and 54 mortars pointed this direction. They will open fire shortly after the explosion. And then about 5, Ledley's division moves forward. When they get here, they are shocked. They do what we are still doing, kind of looking at the crater. It's still hissing, no grass growing in it. There are men in the bottom crying out in agony. They're missing arms, legs, large parts of their upper body or lower body, covered in earth and debris. And the Federals say they could not ignore the rebels. They go down and try to provide some sort of humanitarian relief, as these people, some of them, are about to die. Those who are only covered in earth but amazingly not hurt at all are extracted and sent to the rear as prisoners. Chunks of clay around them, as large as small cottages, said one of these officers. No one has seen anything like this before here, but they're not able, once they recover their senses, to quickly move forward, because they're down now in a hole that's 30 feet deep, 60 feet wide, and 170 feet long. The length has changed the most today, and in fact, I'm looking at it, and you are too, off to our left. And there's light Confederate resistance. See, what they didn't know is that the Confederates had figured out their little mining plan by the 30th of June, just 5 days after they started. It was really just a lucky guess by Confederate artillerist Edward Porter Alexander. So there is a lot more Confederate artillery in this region, and another line of earthworks behind this one that the Federals are going to have to contend with. Well, that resistance is blocking Federal advance. The 2nd Division is deployed. A 3rd Division is deployed by 7 a.m. and it's still not moving desperately much further past here. So, around 8 a.m., Confederates are responding, trying to move up some reinforcements under William Mahone. And up on that hill, Burnside ordered Ferrero's division to go into combat. So we are going to go meet men Ferrero's division and talk about their experiences here on the battlefield that morning.